I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Education for the School District of Baraboo to order for Monday, February the 13th, 2012, with roll call. Mr. Borkenhagen.
Here.
Mr. Cummings.
Here.
Mr. McNevin.
Here.
Mr. Meering.
Here.
Mr. Mortimer.
Here.
Mr. Vidro.
Here.
And Vodak here. Continue with the pledge. The flag's behind the screen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would entertain a motion that it be resolved the Board of Education approve the minutes of the January 23rd, 2012 meeting as printed.
I so move. Second.
Motion by Meering, seconded by Vidro. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes approved. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Correspondence. I have none. Any other board members? Hearing none, any administrative correspondence?
I have several tonight. First of all, we received word from the Wisconsin School Counselor Association that GLW and the high school were recognized for their Support Personnel Accountability Report Card for Wisconsin called SPARK, and it earned the Pioneer Award for 2011. And I don't know if Danny, Molly, Bill, if you want to talk a little bit more about that process, and I'll pass along some documents that they submitted with data from their schools for that process.
What this process is, as Crystal was just saying, it's an accountability measure for our student services staff. So what is it that they do that affects student achievement? And so this is a volunteer process that we actually started this last summer. The counselors and I, all K-12 counselors and I attended a workshop this summer that where we learned about this SPARK report card and actually began the process of drafting one for each of our buildings. And so we submitted both GLW, the high school, and Jack Young Middle School submitted theirs for judging this year, and we are very pleased that GLW and the high school were selected as a Pioneer winner, and they'll be recognized coming up at their state convention. But it's just a means by which we can show not only our staff, but our parents, our school board, our community, what a vital role that our school counselors play in student achievement on a day-to-day basis. I'm very proud of them.
Molly, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, we had a team that met off and on during some of our PLC time, and we looked at our Swiss data, which is part of the PBIS effort at the elementary level. We also took a look at some of the growth from other measurements, as well as the composition of our building. And our team effort was really led by our school counselor, John Davies, but I believe we had 17 people, which is nearly our entire certified staff involved. It was a pretty intense process within a very short window, but it was definitely a learning experience, and we hope to receive the top award the next time we apply.
Okay. The second correspondence that I have is from the Executive Director, Jim Lynch, from AUSA, the Association of Wisconsin School Administrators. And it's a thank you to Lori for presenting at their conference. She presented on scheduling for RTI, what it might look like in a middle school day. And after the evaluations were compiled, they received lots of positive feedback on Lori's presentation. Great presenter, great energy, great practical information. It's obvious that Ms. Miller is connected to the real world and is in the trenches. And she is in the trenches here in Baraboo, and we're lucky to have her. So anyway, that is from AUSA. And then the last one is addressed to Doug, and it's from one of our state senators regarding the WISNet. And I don't know if you want to talk to that at all, Doug.
Who is it from?
Erpenbach. He's not actually one of our senators.
Well, if the redistricting goes through as is, he will be our senator. So that remains to be seen. That's not in our hands. But he's referring to, and they do have a bill that's currently going through, and I can't tell you whether it's an Assembly bill or a Senate bill, but I know it's one of the two, to discuss this very issue, which is to help which would be helping our broadband coverage, which is a key part of our 21st century initiative. So I will thank him for sending that letter to us.
Although it went very quickly, I do want to say thank you to GLW and the high school and to Danny and to Lori. You know, all the work that gets done, it zips by here so fast. We sometimes don't really recognize how much work goes into accomplishing what you all do, and I, as one, want to make sure that I acknowledge that. Thank
Well,
you.
since you brought it back up, I would love to share with you that that document allows you to have 2 mistakes. So you can have a spacing mistake, or you can have a capitalization mistake, or a misspelling, but you're only allowed 2. So it's pretty intense, the requirements and expectations. They told us the font size, the amount of pages we could have, so the criteria to meet was really
And that's above and beyond the actual data.
no kidding.
If you don't make a mistake, can you carry it over till next year?
Form versus
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Public Viewpoints. Do we have anyone here for public viewpoints tonight? Do we have anyone here for public viewpoints? Public viewpoints? Hearing none, I'd like to move on. Next up, we have on the agenda staff recognition, and I think we're still waiting for one half of our recognized individuals tonight. So I would like to entertain a motion from the
We'll wait a
board
little bit.
to move it to after
Whenever
6.
she gets here.
Well, it'll be after 6. We can just move it or postpone it.
so.
I move. Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Brings us then to the legislative update.
Okay.
Mr. Newman?
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's going on in the legislature right now. The thing that the Wisconsin Associated School Board sent to us, an update, they said budget repair bill looms with a question mark, and hopefully that's the way it remains. There's a gross deficit of $143 million for the biennium, and it's almost a difference of $216 million. Governor Walker said in his statement he would not increase taxes to solve the shortfall. He's looking for additional ways to eliminate wasteful spending. And again, they did receive a settlement from the foreclosure and mortgaging service thing, a nationwide thing that Attorney General Holland was involved with, and not to get into any of the politics of it, but they appear like they're going to use some of that money to shore up that hole. Education Committee will be very busy this week. They're going to be discussing a lot of things regarding legislation regarding the Read to Lead and the Educator Effectiveness Design Team. Many of those things are things that we are doing currently in the school district. And some of the accountability sessions or things will be coming into key play for all schools, and I shouldn't say all schools, I should say all public schools, because for right now, all voucher schools are at least being exempted from the accountability system, even though when they originally met, they seemed to have an agreement that said that the voucher schools would be part of that. And but they did not like it, and apparently, at least for right now, the legislation is not including that. And they receive public money, so they probably should, but we'll see what the legislature will say on that. Anything else, we can talk about it later when we talk about our resolution. So that's my report.
Thank you. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Continuous School Improvement. We have a number of members of our leadership team with us, administrative team with us here tonight. And first up is the RTI Survey data and next steps. Ms. Scott and Ms. Mueller. I don't know which one's going first.
We just wanted to bring forward to you some survey data that we've collected from the staff with regards to RTI. reminding everyone that this is the school improvement model that we're working with our staff to implement to have the biggest impact on student gains.
So as we put this framework for change into place, it's certainly a process. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. So this is just kind of a visual of what that process looks like. So currently we are kind of in the middle, more so still building consensus on what this school improvement process looks like. But along the way, we are starting to put some of those infrastructures into place in terms of guaranteeing academic engaged time, starting to set up time for interventions within each of the buildings. So we are starting to build some of that infrastructure as well. And we'll certainly continue along this framework and always come back to making sure that we have consensus, continuing to refine that infrastructure once we get that into place. But of course, we need to look at how we're going to sustain this as well, because this isn't something that you do once and then you're done. So, so as part of building that consensus, Lori and I put out an RTI belief survey to the staff to kind of see where we were in terms of building that. So we're going to share those results with you tonight.
So consensus is essential for change, and with the Midwest Instructional Leadership Council, we've done some research, and in working in schools across the Midwest implementing RTI, what we know is that if you don't have consensus with your staff on what we all believe is good for kids and that we have a shared vision to help with implementation, it falls apart. You can have the best infrastructure in place, but if the consensus and beliefs of the staff aren't there, it won't succeed. So some questions that we wanted to address as we surveyed the staff is, what do we believe about students and how they are best served? What are we currently doing, and does this align with our beliefs? Are we currently doing things that result in good outcomes for students? And do we have the skills to do what we think is best, and what kind of professional development would we need? We've asked this question quite a bit this whole first half of the school year. Are we happy with our student outcome data? And our answer is no, we want to do better. And so what are those implementation requirements that's understood by all? And that's a lot of the work we've been doing with our infrastructure.
So really what we're talking about is equity and excellence for all students. So Lori and I often talk about the time that we have with our students. That's the only currency that we have. We don't have any more, any less than that. So we really need to have people understand that student performance is truly influenced by the quality of instruction that they receive, along with the interventions and how we deliver them. That's going to be what drives our success. It's not preconceived notions about what a particular child might be able to achieve. And we need to make sure that we're making our decisions based on data, not by what we think we know or how we feel, but what the data is telling us. And that our expectations for student performance, again, should be dependent on how the child is responding to our instruction and our interventions. We can't predict how a student might do based on a single score, but rather how they are doing in the classroom based on the instruction and the interventions that we deliver to them. And our students who are at risk, and we did include, we made a point of including our gifted and talented students in that category as well, because if we're not meeting their needs, they certainly can be at risk. But all of our students, including those that are at risk, can achieve proficiency and maximize their achievement as well. So the survey that we did, again, our purpose was to assess where we as a district, what our beliefs and perceptions of the practice related to RTI and to help guide our next steps. So it was a 25-item survey that we sent out to all certified staff. We had 128 respondents, and the scale there is 5 was strongly agree to 1 strongly disagree. Oh, what did I say?
128.
Oh, sorry, 178, not 128.
Okay, so we didn't choose all 25 items to share the results, but we picked the ones that were particular to the belief structures for RTI. So in terms of quality instruction, the average score was a 4.14, which would mean our staff agrees, for the most part, that core instruction should be effective enough to result in 80% of students achieving benchmarks in reading and math. 80% is the number that's chosen by the RTI framework, that we think 80% of students should be responsive to the curriculum and another 20% would need something more to be successful. In terms of general education, classroom teachers should implement more differentiated and flexible instructional practices to address the needs of a more diverse student body. Our staff responded on average at 3.81, which means they're neutral but getting close to agreeing that that's the right thing to do. To me, that tells me we have some professional development to continue to do with our staff. In terms of the use of additional interventions in the general education classroom would result in success for more students. Our staff largely agreed with the 4.10. And prevention activities and early intervention strategies in schools would result in fewer referrals to problem-solving teams and placements in special education. I think this is an interesting number, 4.14 on average agreed that that's the case. And we do know that we have some work to do in helping our teachers provide interventions in the classroom before quickly falling to that. I think this child might need to be placed in special ed because they're not just sure what to do to make sure the student is successful, and that's the importance of intervening.
So going back to whether or not we're making decisions based on our data, so using student-based data to determine intervention effectiveness is more accurate than using only teacher judgment. Our average score was 3.88, so again, approaching that agreement, but again, I think we have some professional development to do around the use of data and how that is so key in driving our instruction. Expectations, students with high incidence disabilities who are receiving special education services are capable of achieving grade level benchmarks in reading and math. C, we definitely fell within the neutral category again, so that kind of falls back to, are we operating under a deficit model thinking, or do we truly have high expectations for all of our students, including special education students? And if we have the right supports in place, there's absolutely no reason why they can't be achieving benchmark along with their general education. Many students currently identified as LD do not have a disability, but rather they came to school not ready to learn or felt too far behind academically for the available interventions to close the gap sufficiently. There we fell in the disagree to neutral range, so that's, again, goes back to professional development, and is it truly a student with a learning disability versus what we might call an opportunity gap there.
Could you define opportunity gap?
Absolutely. So, for example, students may not have the opportunity as they are developing to have those vocabulary-rich environments, perhaps within the home environment. So perhaps don't have a lot of exposure to reading or have a rich vocabulary spoken within the home. So they might come to school with maybe not some of those opportunities that maybe some of their peers might have. So they might appear delayed in comparison to their peers when in fact it was they didn't have the opportunity or the exposure to those kinds of learning experiences versus it being a true learning disability.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
And then with the last one, maximizing individual potential, this is what it's really all about for me with regards to response intervention. And so I'm not happy with our average score here. All students can achieve grade level benchmarks if they have sufficient support. And our staff is pretty neutral about that. So we have some work to do. It goes back to what I was saying earlier, that we know if our staff doesn't have consensus on this is the right thing to do for students, our efforts will not achieve the potential that they can have on student gains.
Lori, could that also be read as a teacher perspective saying, if I don't have the resources to assist me, I don't know if I can help here?
Absolutely, absolutely. So the professional development is key. And you know, as we talk about guidelines, what we can use this data for and what our next steps, I think that's really important. And we do have plans to continuously provide that professional development. What do these supports look like? Just tonight, Danny and I were over at GLW and we modeled for their staff how to do an intervention team process using the data that we have from our winter assessments and planning appropriately for interventions and enrichment. And we feel that's important to take the time to do that. Model it, what does it look like in practice, answer questions. And it was a really good conversation. And we're planning to do that at all the building levels. With our professional development plan moving forward for 2012-13, there's going to be ongoing professional development in all these areas of meeting the needs of all kids, whether it's gifted and talented instructional strategies or what works for English language learners, a number of team teaching, inclusive practices. That's all included in our professional development plan moving forward. We know that time and tools for data-driven decision-making is important, so that we're using our data to make decisions, and we do use our PLC structures. That's built into our daily, yearly structures to do that. We have also been working on our balanced assessment framework, which we've talked about here before at the board, identifying the assessments that are going to give us the data we need to make the good decisions, and then also the staff developing their own assessments in relation to their essential learning targets. We need to raise expectations for all students in the district. And there's no reason why any student in the Baraboo School District can't achieve their maximum individual potential. And we got to stop making excuses for our students and start holding our students to a high level of expectation, because they can meet our expectations. It's the opportunities that we need to provide for them to be successful. So that can occur through revisions to scope and sequence, which we're working on. We're doing that a lot at the high school right now. Working on our essential learning targets in relation to the Common Core, which is increasing our rigor, and then the decision-making rules that we're going to use to determine whether students are responding favorably to the curriculum or not. It's really about improving the rigor for all of our students. And then we need to continue to build infrastructure supports to implement RTI. So maximizing our building schedules to guarantee that academic engaged time that Danny mentioned before, and also time to provide supplemental intensive interventions or enrichment. So these are all things that we have already a lot going on in the school district, but also steps to move forward, and this data really gives us some good direction.
Lori?
Yes.
For that support part there, did it go into detail what they thought they needed for support? Or is it just what you've got set yourself?
There are a number of questions on the survey that ask for what types of supports that they feel like they need. And it's mainly around the data, what kind of data do we have in place, and is that sufficient? The time to collaborate is another question. Also, the interventions available. I think one of the things, and we have this on our action plan, Danny and I work on RTI quite a bit, is we need to define what interventions do we have in our toolkit for teachers, so that when they do use the data and they make decisions, well, so-and-so needs intervention, what do we have to provide them? What strategies are we going to use? And same for our gifted students. What are some strategies we're going to use or enrichment opportunities are we going to provide? So we are talking about mapping that out so teachers have that as a menu to draw from. Those are the type of supports. So that's the end. It's really short. What kind of other questions do you have for us?
At the next meeting, we're going to share some of our benchmark assessments, and we're going to take a look at the growth in some of the schools that have structured that intervention time within their buildings in creative ways to be able to systematically respond to wherever students are at on a weekly basis. And it's pretty exciting data to take a look at. Well, we think all data is exciting, but this is really exciting data.
When we get these numbers in the surveys that are lower, how are we going? Is it just through professional development where you feel that, okay, you're going to show them this is what happens, and you can give them data from other school districts or from other times where this has been implemented that will hopefully bring those numbers up so that they can realize that when they implement these new things that they've learned, that it will actually have an effect?
Absolutely. I think it's important to come back and ask these questions over time, because if we had not taken the time to do this survey and we just assumed everyone's behind our vision, we would keep moving forward but not bringing everyone along with us. And so it's important to have this very honest information so that we know where we need to focus our conversations with staff. And that will happen through professional development and also the supports.
Right, and when you said share data from other districts, I don't think we necessarily have to go outside to other districts. We're going to be able to have that data within our school system to connect directly to interventions and structures that are in place, not all across the district, but in certain pockets, and then we want to emulate that and have that consistent across the district.
Certain people will already be doing it.
Right.
So.
Well, and
okay.
it might be very contagious for other staff when they see the growth in some buildings who are working to put in the structure, the infrastructure, and supports for teachers to do this work, and they see the gains in just a half a year's time. It could be very contagious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of with PBIS. I mean, it started with East, and all of a sudden you had all the other
Right.
elementaries. I want this now,
Absolutely.
type of thing. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
In addition to that, professional development goes back to having those difficult conversations. I mean, it's some of these questions that we're asking of ourselves and asking of our teachers, they're hard to talk about, no doubt about it. But you know what, I think Lori and I are trying and be a resource for staff and provide them with professional development. But sometimes it's just a matter of talking through what their concerns are, what their fears are, or what they need for support, and how can we get them that support. So it's a journey, and we're certainly kind of at the beginning stages, but some of the results that we're already seeing are just amazing. We're excited to share them with you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd like to take this opportunity to do the staff recognition portion of our agenda. And we are honored to have our school psychologists, Steve Lean and Marcia Everts, with us tonight. And I'll turn it over to Dr. Ritzenauer.
Well, I'm actually going to turn it over to Danny because she works more closely with them. And I do know that, as you realize, we had one of our school psychologists leave just before the start of the school year, and we've been trying to fill some of those needs with a part-time person outside of our district. And so Marcia and Steve have certainly risen to the demands and the needs. I hardly see them anymore because they're out there and they're so busy. And Danny's going to share some specifics about their positions.
Yeah, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize the amazing work that both Marcia and Steve do as two of our school psychologists for the district. Particularly this year, as Crystal was saying, because we are not at a full staff, so they have been putting in some incredibly long days. But Steve and Marcia work with all students ages 3 through 21 to ensure success, not only academically, but behaviorally, emotionally, socially. They are true collaborators. They collaborate with their fellow teachers, with community agencies, with administration, and with parents to, again, kind of take that team approach that we are all here to work together to support the success of our students. And it truly creates a supportive learning environment that strengthens those connections between home, school, and community. So we kind of did some brainstorming, and this is probably just the tip of the iceberg, and I'm certainly not going to go through this exhaustive list with you, but we felt it was important for you to know some of the unique skills that they bring to the district as a school psychologist. They are highly trained in both the field of psychology as well as the field of education. So they bring, again, a unique skill set to the table that emphasizes preparation not only in mental health, but in educational interventions, child development, learning, behavior, motivation, curriculum and instruction, assessment, consultation, collaboration, and school law. I actually knew Steve and Marcia prior to coming to Baraboo, and they are both very highly respected within the field of school psychology. As the district continues to implement its multi-tiered systems of support, I think Marcia and Steve will be relied upon to play a key role in implementing RTI within their buildings. I feel so blessed to have the opportunity to work with both of them on a daily basis. They certainly make my job easier. And again, while I'm sure there's not a typical day for them, the sheet that I handed out just kind of highlights some of the things that they do on a daily basis. So thank you for all that you do, particularly this year. I know it's been a difficult year. So.
Is there anything that you guys would like to share?
I think Danny's being so nice because she was for the psychologist. It has been a difficult year. I know, speaking for Marcia and myself, it's really been tough trying to keep up. We have a lot of timelines and deadlines with paperwork and special ed, and with her taking on some more elementary buildings and myself taking on the middle school along with the high school in Gordon Wilson. it's tough. It's tough to keep up. And there's days, I know she has the same days, I'm sure administrators have the same thing, where you have a list of things you want to accomplish when you get to school that day, and you never even get to them, and you're busy all day long. So, you know, those kinds of things have been tough this year. But I'm glad Marcia's line. Marcia, I think, has a much better understanding and background in RTI than I do. I'm kind of an old veteran, and so I have to learn some new tricks here. So you know, she will really be helpful down the road in implementing RTI. And I consult with her a lot about those things, and with PBIS as well. So we're looking forward to our roles changing. I'm probably a little more nervous about it than Marcia is.
Well, I have some certificates here for you in recognition of your contributions to our district and to keep you here. And I think the light is at the end of the tunnel. You'll notice there's an agenda item tonight to post for a school psychologist for next year. So thank you, Steve, for all the work that you do with our students and our staff. And Marcia, thank you very much. And I know you have a big to-do list for tomorrow. So thank you for taking time out to come today.
Brings us back to the agenda under continuous school improvement, the parent survey data, and that was information that was shared with the board, and I don't know if we want to field any questions, if you want to expand upon it.
As you know, we felt it was important to get input from parents this year on a variety of topics as we move forward in our decision-making process, and we ran through a similar process with our staff. And as Kevin alluded to, you've been provided with kind of a summary of the parent survey results. We had different questions at different levels, and I attempted to kind of compile some of those results for you on the front page. Everything from our PLC schedule to the structure of our parent-teacher conferences this year that was changed just a little bit. The elimination of the milk break at the elementary was included. Registration occurring with our open houses. And some things that were specific to building level schedules, the targeted interventions and TA time at the middle school. A few questions related to seniors and graduation times, and then the belt surveys were already shared with you at a previous meeting. So the purpose of that is just to get an idea and to gauge where our parents are at, to understand what their needs are, to be responsive. And the same with the staff, and we provided a little bit more information to the board with some of the comments. We had one open-ended question about the PLC times, and we provided some options, but then also left it open to other suggestions. And then we had an open-ended question about any other comments or suggestions regarding the calendar or building schedules and those kinds of things. As you can see, I think generally people are supportive of that. There are still questions about why can't we hold full professional developments each month. Well, one of the things that keeps us from doing that are the required days of instruction per DPI. There were also some questions about what is happening during these PLCs, what are the outcomes. And so at the next meeting, February 27th, we're going to come back with some of the outcomes that have been the result of our PLC schedule. We'll come forward with a proposed schedule for next year. And we also want to present some of the data on our utilization of substitute teachers this year. So this is a piece of the data and a piece of the picture. And I would welcome any of the other administrators to elaborate any more on these surveys.
Well, I know at the middle school level, you know, the PLC time, I think all the work that's been done there. And we have it structured so that we have committee work that's specific to our building committees that are district level committees. And I look at all the work that is being done in areas like school safety, technology, literacy, and I wonder if we didn't have that time, where would we find the time to get all that work done? So I'm finding it to be very, very valuable to have those pieces in place so that we can have time to work on those things. And we have committees that have done a tremendous amount of work in a short period of time. And it focuses our whole building on the big picture, I think.
I know that the district is on a very ambitious plan to address student achievement, and I would echo what John is saying, that the time that we use on those afternoons is critical to move the district forward on the number of initiatives that we are taking on at once, because we feel that's really important for our students. Without that time, we wouldn't be where we are today. So.
Some of the requests that we're receiving from parents or questions are, what can you provide our children during this release time? So we've been collaborating with UW Baraboo campus on identifying some needs and transition needs, and looking at different kinds of assessments and preparation for students going on to college to be prepared in the area. I think specifically math we're taking a look at. And we're looking at other kinds of activities, working with our continuing ed office at UW, and trying to generate some different ideas and options for students during that time as well, so that it's a productive time for them too.
I guess I would echo what's been said at this point already. I mean, we've done a lot of what I would call heavy lifting thus far this year with regards to a number of initiatives, not only identifying the essential learning targets, but working on getting PBIS implemented here at the high school, trying to get our RTI framework in place, which I believe we're very, very close to having done with regards to that. We've talked about law day. I was talking to you folks about that a few months back. We're taking a look at changing graduation requirements. We've had committees that have been working towards that end. Along with those changes, looking at some possible changes to the structure of the high school day and offering students the opportunity to take 8 classes a day as opposed to 7. We wouldn't be anywhere near even dabbling our feet in the water with regards to those issues if we didn't have the time we have. So we've done a lot, we've asked a lot, and our staff has provided a lot, and so the time has been valuable and very well used.
So we're not asking for any action tonight, but as you have a chance to kind of sift through some of that data, if you have questions, we encourage you to reach out to any of us to try to get more information about those areas.
And this will be an ongoing process, replying back to those parties that have filled out and given us data, to thank them for taking the time and completing the loop.
Yeah, and just by using this process, we've identified some needs and what I would call tweaks and changes within our calendar, and we're already taking a look at making those changes. One example is elementary parent-teacher conferences. We're realizing that with the time available to staff to do that, we need to take a look at structuring that time differently and perhaps targeting even specific students and families for specific conferences. Because it's done much differently at the elementary than it is at the secondary level, where people pop in. We have actual scheduled times at the elementary to meet with those. So things like that. It's interesting though as you look at the responses, because you'll have one person say, I want to end the school year sooner, so we eliminate part of spring break, and you'll have another person say, I want spring break extended. So you have to kind of balance that, and overall what we're trying to do is foremost provide a calendar and a structure that works for our kids and to maximize that student learning. And then secondly, we want to be responsive to the needs of our staff, and if we can produce the same outcomes and do it in a little bit different way, we want to be open to those ideas and suggestions.
So did we cover both of those items?
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments from board members before we move on?
Well, I mean, at this point, we're going to have a further discussion on this next time.
Yes.
And so, in the interim, we could probably, again, send some questions and carbon copy you with whatever those questions are. I do have some questions, but we can bring them up and we can discuss them further even.
And we'll make sure that we share those responses with the entire board so everyone has the same information.
That'll be good.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Personnel Recommendations. First up is the approval of resignations. I would entertain the approval of the 3 resignations that are presented. Geraldine Daniels, second grade position at GLW, Florence LeBeau, high school FCE position, and Chris Raschik, that's correct?
Close enough.
From the school psychologist position, entertain the approval of those 3 resignations.
I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mearing, seconded by Vidro. Any discussion?
The years of service that are represented.
Well,
are
we
quite-
knew Chris would only be with us 1 year.
Right,
And it's
right.
40%. Geraldine has been with us 2 years, and I believe it's Flo's 2nd year as well, so not long-term employees.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion of the approval of the resignations carried. Brings us to the approval of the retirements. So if you want to start counting years, Mr. Vidro?
That's it.
You can take note of these.
They're in there, yeah.
We have
okay.
2 retirements.
3.
3, sorry.
Carried over.
I was ahead of the curve.
You were ahead of the curve,
You were
correct.
ahead.
So I think we can entertain the approval and discuss the years. We have the Michael Carpenter from High School Business Education, 27 years, David Holm from East, grade 3 for 33 years, and Helmy Tennis from 4th grade at GLW, 28 years. I would entertain a motion for the approval of those retirements with the courtesy and accolades of a letter expressing our appreciation for their years of service to the district.
I also move.
Second.
Motion by Cummings, seconded by Vidro. Any continued discussion?
These are lives of dedication, and coming to the end of that period is something of great distinction, and I just want to honor those people who year after year after year, decade after decade, support our children. It is one of the great joys and challenges of life.
Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. For the retirements, brings us to the portion, I'm sorry,
I have a hire,
a hire?
for lack of better place to put it, on the agenda.
Okay.
And this is more of an FYI unless the board wants to take a formal approval. We have Corey Griffin, who will be the 2nd level technician support in the technology department here at the high school, the .5 FTE position that the board approved recently with the terms of that hire. She comes with a great deal of experience in the private sector, and I think the tech staff is excited to have her aboard.
She has been subbing in the tech staff as well.
Yes.
Since
Yes.
for quite a while. There's no action.
There is no action required.
Thank you for the update.
Thank you.
Brings us to the portion of the agenda entitled Approval of Postings. There was discussion previous of the first, which is for the school psychologist position.
If I could clarify, though, Chris Raschick is currently 40%. Prior to Chris helping us out this year, that's 100% position, so we will be posting for 100% FTE.
This has been something I thought we would have been trying to get. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
It was very difficult because of the timing of the previous resignation.
Well, we have dedicated staff that are willing to work.
But they would like to see some light at the end of the tunnel.
They're not hanging around for our wit.
Oh, okay. Probably not.
They're hanging around for this vote.
Well, again, basically, we've been working even with that 40% short staff.
Yes.
Yes.
And so this would obviously, we were going to be in a further hole at this point without that person, so.
And we'd like to get an early start because this is a position that's rather difficult to fill.
Absolutely. I can concur with that from my experience with seats of 5. They are not easy. I move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Hearing, seconded by Vidro. for the posting of the school psychologist position at 100%. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to the elementary positions general.
We typically will post for just a broad range of grade levels, and because we know as every year when summer comes, somebody will leave, so we have a pool of applicants to choose from.
So this isn't a specific, it's just saying that,
Well, we have two retirements, as you can see, that are elementary, and we also have one resignation. There may be more coming that we're not aware of yet. So when we post for elementary, we typically will just post for the elementary and then select the candidates based on their experience in particular grade levels.
move to approve.
Second.
The motion was by Mr. McNevin, correct?
Yes, sir.
Seconded by Mr. Vidro. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Brings us to the approval of the long-term substitute positions. And where are we at with the high school?
We're
physical
going to
education?
table that to the next meeting.
Okay. So then we have the middle school, Jack Young Middle School Social Studies,
And-
long-term sub, familiar name, Sue Gouge.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion by Mortimer, seconded by Meering. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Congratulations. Welcome back, Sue.
And I have one
One more?
more
All right.
long-term sub. Again, not a real clear place to put this on the agenda. As you know, we've been interviewing and trying to seek out people to support our business office since our accountant has left. We've been unsuccessful so far in those attempts. So we are utilizing Gary Christensen on an hourly basis with a flat $25 per hour as needed. The time he's been coming in has been rather limited, but he's working with other staff and transitioning some of those responsibilities over and making sure that we've got payroll running and we're paying people and that our general ledger is set. So if the board would please allow us and approve us to continue to utilize Gary in that capacity until we secure someone for that position.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Vidro, seconded by Cummings. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to the working session portion of our agenda. First up is the approval of the high school band and choir trip to Chicago.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motioned by Mr. McNevin, seconded by Mr. Mortimer. Discussion. Hearing none. Those in favor of allowing the high school band and choir to Chicago on March the 21st, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Brings us to the Jack Young Middle School building wall project presentation. I would entertain a motion to table the presentation from Mr. Szymanski to the next board meeting.
Also move.
I'll second that.
There's a motion from Mr. Cummings and a seconded by Mr. Meering to table the discussion until the next board meeting. Those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? I also would entertain a motion to offer a services contract to Lynn Lauersdorf at a dollar value not to exceed $2,500 to come into the district and take a look at what our situation is with the wall. His findings would thus be turned over to Mid-States and Mr. Szymanski. And he is available to come into our district as early as this Wednesday.
Move to approve.
Second.
Could we get some background just for the general public that might watch this at home as to who this individual is and what some of their qualifications are and why we're asking him to bird dog this project,
Okay,
more or less?
so we have a motion, we have a second, we're in the discussion phase. The Building, Grounds, and Transportation Committee, which is chaired by Mr. Cummings, met last Monday, and Mr. Szymanski provided us an update on where his project was and what his final recommendations were going to be. At that committee level, of which Mr. Mortimer is a member and Mr. Cummings, along with myself, serve on that committee, there was a discussion about the potential of having, you know, it's a pretty significant amount of dollars that we're looking at spending, and if there's just another set of eyes that can look at the project to maybe come up with a solution that we're not thinking of. Initially at the committee meeting, it was decided that, you know, our list of options was quite short, and our timeline for accomplishing the project to start this summer was getting very tight. So the committee recommended to come to the board to move forward. Since then, there was a couple of parties, individuals within the community that have a background in construction, architect, and engineering that came forth with a name of an individual, Mr. Lauersdorf, who I was then put in contact with by Mr. Dave Stotts from the community here. And after having discussion with him, and looking at his qualifications, he has taught symposiums in the Midwest, out east. He's been a state employee as far as in the architectural and design realm for a number of years. He is semi-retired. He lives in Madison, and through the discussion and the qualifications that he presented, and Mr. Long, you can chime in if you have anything to add, but I mean, he's an expert at masonry. He is not an architect, he's an engineer, so there are aspects of the program that he probably does not have the expertise to comment on. But nonetheless, he has worked with projects as a state employee to deal with similar situations. I can't say identical because, without him seeing what we're dealing with at the middle school, but he has worked with solutions for state buildings over the course of many years. So for the expense that the district is going to incur to have him look at the potential of any other options, I just think that it's money well spent, and if we can do it in a timeline that meets with his schedule so that it doesn't put a crimp in our trying to accomplish the project this summer, I just think it's a good thing to do. So, does that answer your question?
Yes, I just thought that the general public might like to know that answer.
Not to exceed 25.
Correct.
So is the intent that the board will act on moving the project forward at the next meeting?
Well, I think the expectation would be dependent upon what the recommendations are from Mr. Lauersdorf and connections and conversations with Al. I would leave it up to Al. That if Al wants to come back with any changes to what he's recommended, that would go through the BG&T. Otherwise, Al can still present at the next board meeting, and if he has any deviation from what was presented to the committee, he can do it at that time. That would be.
I would still like to hear the input, even if Al says we're not going to go that way, but see what recommendations that other person would have. So.
We can certainly do that. Mm-hmm. Any other discussion? Having a motion and a second on the floor, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. The Beryl Newman Stadium track update. Mr. Cummings is normally the one that attends. Mr. Mortimer, I think you've been at most, if not all of them. Gary asked me to attend the last meeting in his absence. Basically, there were a couple of minor changes that were made for those that haven't followed the project from the beginning. Essentially, the recommended changes from point of beginning at the last meeting, with some feedback from those that were at the meeting as well, including community members and former teachers and the track department and football department. They are going to fence in the area around the pits, which there was a concern with having that fenced off so that when there aren't events there, that they're not trampled or vandalized or otherwise raise havoc with them. So that was part of the changes that were made to the drawings that were presented last time. And also, according to Aaron's not here, so I'm trying to speak for Aaron as well, it extended the jumps 10 feet per runway put pigtails on each of the curves. The west side is the minimum to help with the space, and on the south end, we had talked about the entry point, which is where the current ticket booth is over here. Turn the ticket booth with the pedestrian gate just to the north side, and then tiled the area with donor signs on the first corner. That would be the corner up here.
Be inside.
Inside the gate. There will be additional concepts coming, and probably a meeting in the fairly near future, I would think. But Mr. Mortimer, you were in attendance. Mr. Long, you were there. I don't know if I'm missing anything as far as what was presented.
I think we're getting close to having a visual representation that reflects all of those changes. That should be coming soon, and we'll make sure that board members receive a copy of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I can certainly pass this down, but to be honest
pretty
with you,
small.
Yeah, it's
You'll be challenged.
It looks like an aerial view, basically what it looks like.
30,000.
If you're extending the long jumps 10 feet, you have high expectations for our athletes now.
Well, I think it has to do more with the pole vault.
Oh, okay.
No, I don't. I'm not sure why. We discussed
40 feet.
We discussed whether or not there was room to do that based on the configuration. If you're not aware, the pits would move to behind where the current press box is. I don't know if that's anything anybody else has been following, but we will have more on that later. The agenda item to discuss the board meetings for March. The last meeting in March is scheduled to be during a portion of the month where we don't have school, correct?
Spring break, right?
Spring break.
Mm-hmm.
And we can either continue with that meeting, which I think that's kind of the consensus of the administration, but just want to make sure that everybody understands that that meeting date, which is the 26th of March, is...
It will probably be a lighter meeting. I anticipate a number of our administrators will be with their families.
Well, if we can make it lighter, can we make it non-existent?
That's pretty light.
I mean, you can lighten the load.
Well, that's why it's on the board agenda.
Well, my concern would be if we have any actions to take in regards to some of the hires that we're talking about, that it may be beneficial to retain that opportunity.
The board is willing to meet. I think we should.
Any board member have a conflict with that date personally? Well, I would just like to suggest we just leave it as it is. So we'd have the meeting on the 12th and the meeting on the 26th.
We don't have to really take action.
No, we don't.
No.
You don't need to do anything. That brings us to...
No, right, March 6th, the
March 6th.
leadership retreat.
Oh, okay. You received an email from Crystal, which was actually part of your agenda update, that talks about a leadership retreat on Tuesday, March the 6th. Comments, willingness to attend. We're not 100% sure where we're going to be at, are we, Crystal?
Well, last summer we talked about coming together mid-year, our BA leadership, our administrative team, and our board to talk about, check in our progress, and I provided this for the board tonight. This was sort of a summary of some of the core beliefs and areas that we all agreed upon, and I think it would be good for us as we enter into talking about employee handbooks and negotiations and all of the changes that are coming forward, to be able to come together as leadership teams and assess our progress. We had talked to Pizza Ranch about having their back room that night at 6 o'clock and keeping our meeting to an hour, hour and a half. People would pay for their own meals. They have a buffet already set up. We do have doors that we could close there, and as we enter into our discussions. And again, I just think it would be an opportunity for us again to check in with each other on our progress and talk about changes that we need to make as we progress throughout the year. Our BA is already on board. I don't think I've talked to the administrative team yet. Are you guys on board for pizza? Well, it certainly wouldn't be a long evening. We would look at having a rather brief discussion at no cost to the district.
Well, at the summer retreat, Gary was there, Peter was there, Doug was there,
Yep.
I was there, Sean was there. I mean, we had a pretty good representation of the board at that meeting, and I think we need to fulfill our pledge to have an update about it, so.
We
I'll be
won't,
there.
we
I can
won't
be there.
make you do any activities this time. We won't make you close your eyes and spin. But I do think it's an opportunity to just have a nice kind of informal discussion with our leadership groups.
I think it's good if we close our eyes.
I kept my eyes open and just watched you, Peter.
I think it's a great thing, and I would like to.
I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
Sean, are you looking forward to it as well?
He is a happy camper.
What day of the week is March 6th?
Tuesday.
Then I'm very much looking forward to it.
Okay. Well, we'll post it as such then. Thank you for reminding me to bring it up. Brings us to the adoption resolution, which was alluded to earlier in the meeting by Mr. Mehring. I don't know that it's necessary to read the whole thing, but Mr. Mehring, if you so desire.
I'll just touch on it. It is fully written in the agenda. Part of this occurred last year. It was one of their many late night meetings. A resolution was made by our legislature very late at night, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. And part of this resolution was to accommodate a change in the voucher rules, which would so then they could have voucher schools in the Racine School District. Because of the rules of the state, they had to create a piece of legislation that basically opened it up for many other school districts to potentially have vouchers. And they stated that was not their original intent, and we will have to take them at their word on that. Is particularly the governor and Senator Ellis and Representative Robin Voss, who was one of the people that did make that original resolution, that they would close what they would call, it's called the voucher loophole. There are some school districts, Green Bay I think is one, that is very close to meeting some of those qualifications. And the problem is that there has not really been a transparent public discussion of this particular resolution because of how it was originally enacted. And so really this resolution is basically stating that keep your word, close the loophole, and at some future date, if you want to, the legislation could open it up, but then they should reopen it with full public input for any of these other schools to be vouchers. So I don't know if anybody has any particular questions on it, but the resolution is one that was encouraged by Wisconsin Association of School Boards to adopt and to follow through with our legislators to have that discussion, that hopefully that they would carry forward and have a floor vote because it's been voted by the Senate and it has just been languishing, not being voted on by Assembly for roughly, I think it was October. So it's been roughly 4 months that it has not been brought to a floor vote on the Assembly. So I make the motion to adopt that resolution.
For a second?
Second.
Motioned and eloquently explained by Mr. Mehring, seconded by Mr. Pedro. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the board's support of the resolution as motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you for your work on that, Doug. I can't wait until you come back to the board and say that yes, the Assembly actually did take up the item and vote on it. So
We will
please
we
keep us
will
posted.
we will carry forward and we will go with the hope that they will carry forward on their responsibilities.
Okay, thank you. Brings us to the portion of the agenda for the entertainment of executive closed session as posted per statutes.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by McNevin, seconded by Mehring.
Mr. President, can I make a motion or request that the last portion of the closed session be done in open session?
The last portion.
Been advised by
Yep.
attorney not to.
I'm not sure. which portion, define to me which portion you're asking about.
Consideration of initiating an investigation of board member conduct.
You're requesting that it be an open session?
Yeah.
We've been advised by the attorneys to have the discussion in closed session and any action to have that take place in open session. And that's under statutes 1985 1F.
So the action itself would be an open. Does that
Right.
answer your question?
Right.
So those in favor of going to closed by roll call, Borkenhagen,
Here.
Cummings,
Aye.
McNevin,
Aye.
Meering,
Aye.
Mortimer,
Aye.
Vidro,
Aye.
and Vodak here. 5 minutes to go to close. Thank you. Board of Education is now reconvened in open session. And we have item to act upon from closed session. Whereas the district has received reports of alleged conduct unbecoming a board member by board member Ed Mortimer occurring last week, and whereas, according to the district, this report is not an isolated instance of alleged conduct unbecoming a board member by board member Ed Mortimer, and whereas it is in the interest of the board, the administration, the staff, and Mr. Mortimer to determine whether Mr. Mortimer has engaged in any conduct unbecoming a board member, therefore, I entertain a motion that the board approve the hiring of an independent investigator to investigate the conduct of Ed Mortimer in his role as a board member, and I further move that the independent investigator consult with the board president and district administrator prior to the initiation of said investigation. I entertain that motion.
I will so move.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Note, the motion passes 5-1 with Mr. Mortimer having exited the meeting. We have also on our open session agenda item a contract for administrator, interim administrator here at the high school for the associate principal position, and that is Shelley Weiss. I would entertain that administrative contract.
Move to approve.
Second.
Any discussion?
Before we, I'm going to approve it, but is there any possibility, the way Bill was talking, is it possible for her to be permanent? Or is this?
No, this will be ending at the end of the school
She's
year.
definitely not going to look at maybe applying for the full-time?
No, she's retired.
Oh.
The duration of the contract is the 20th of February through the 6th of June.
Sure.
2020.
Well, I didn't know. I mean, the way it sounded like she was really good, that maybe she might.
Maybe we could keep
We
her.
talk her to staying around, but don't sound like it. Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried and passed. Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.